All right, let's do this. So my notes that I made for this, the title of the document was "Confidence is Bullshit."
Yeah.
Could be the episode title. I don't know yet, but I want to dive into it. So we had a very brief discussion about this after one of our previous recording sessions. I was like, this is an idea for an episode. And we spoke about it for maybe 5-10 minutes. And we thought that maybe there's going to be a slight disagreement in the way we think about confidence. So I'm excited for this one because my goal for this is either I get to the end of this and I'm more solid on my current thoughts, or I've learned something and changed the way I thought about it. So that's what I'm hoping for with this one.
Cool. Okay. All right. Well, let's begin with, why do we even want to talk about this subject?
Yeah.
Why are we talking about this?
So the premise of this whole show is we want to talk to people actively in the process. Maybe they're just getting started on this whole self-development thing, right? I think that a huge reason people want to try and improve their life, or maybe a motivating factor in that, is feeling a lack of what they call confidence, right? Or the lack of confidence is the first major point of resistance people find when they do try to start improving things. So I really want to dive into that because I think there's a lot to talk about in this one. I think it's going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I agree. Both professionally in the coaching that I do, confidence is a big one, but probably even more so personally. I have battled my own lack of confidence, insecurity, all my life.
It's such a universal thing, right? Like there's no one who's... I almost think that you can't get to a point where you're 100, and probably I don't think you should aim to get to a point where you're 100% completely confident in every aspect of your life. Because I think at that point, you're either neglecting something or maybe you're not pushing yourself as far as you need to. There's a lot in this.
Okay, all right. Well, let's start with, you've got some interesting views on this. So you've already started with confidence is bullshit. Yep. That could be just deliberately a little bit inflammatory, a little bit clickbaity for fun. Can you just clarify what you mean? What do you mean confidence is bullshit?
So the reason I sort of thought of this is when you ask the average person in their day-to-day sort of life to describe someone that they view as confident, what do they mean by labeling someone as confident? It seems like it's this really, there's not a solid definition to it. It's just like, oh, they're just so outgoing. They don't care what people think. They do their own thing. They do things their way. To me, that's sort of a byproduct of something else, something deeper. What makes them appear that way? What makes people perceive them that way? So I think there's a very unclear definition of what confidence actually is, and I believe we put confidence on too much of a pedestal and sort of overvalue what it is. And I think that leads to a lot of problems, because if people look at, wow, confidence is this huge thing that I really should aspire to have, I don't have it, I'm a shit cunt. You know what I mean?
Like, if I don't have it, therefore I can't do X.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's your big hang up with.
Yes. And I think a trap that people can fall into, this was a insight I got from, do you know James Smith?
Yes. Yeah.
So he wrote a book on confidence, and it's a really, really interesting take on it. And it's a lot of what got me sort of starting to think about this. But one thing he said was that people can tend to use a lack of confidence as an excuse for a path of inaction. Yeah. And I heard that and I'm like, that's very interesting, because it is a very easy trap to fall into, I think.
Story of my life, which I'll get into. Yeah.
So that's sort of the foundation of why I wanted to talk about this today. Yeah. Because for me as well, hearing that, I was like, yeah, I can think back to times where I've fallen into that.
Yeah. And to some degree, I am so glad to hear that you've had that realization, and envious that you've had it at a much younger age than I did. Okay, cool. So the angle I'm coming at this from, and feel free to obviously ask questions at any point. I'm going to start by saying, not an expert on confidence. What the angle I want to come at this is very much from my story. Again, we are here to sort of share our story and experiences with other guys, because I think what I've been through personally, a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah.
So that's been one of the blessings in disguise of going through what I've gone through and working with the men that I work with, is when they talk about their experience with anxiety and confidence and the interplay of those sort of things, they know that I get it. Like I fundamentally get it. Yep. But not an expert. I'm just going to sort of share. I'm going to start with sort of like my understanding of what sort of confidence is, how I look at it conceptually. And then at some point, I'm going to sort of share my life's story with it, my experience with it. Yeah. And so if you've got questions or your own stories along the way, we'll go into that.
Yeah, cool. I think that's actually probably a good starting point if we both outline what our current understanding or definition of confidence is. That could be a really good way to steer this.
So I'm just keep looking down at my notes here. I think confidence is misunderstood in the sense that what confidence really is, black and white, is it's a assurance of one's own abilities, or an ability to predict a likely outcome.
Yes.
Yep. In the sense of, when I drive a car, I'm confident driving a car in a very peaceful sort of, I can drive a car. I'm confident I can get from A to B, and the likelihood of me having a crash is by my own fault is relatively very low. I understand how the road works, how the car works. I know how to navigate. Like, I'm pretty chill driving. I can multitask various tasks. You know, you think back to your L's when you're learning, and it's like every car feels like a monster next to you, and you feel like even if you're in the center of your lane that you're about to cross the line. I can do that with like 2 fingers now. Not that I recommend that you do, but like it's just easy. I'm confident because I've got the skill.
Yep.
I think in my own life, again, I'll get into this, but I see it in other people, we can misattribute to confidence what is actually ego and pride. Yeah. I think people can easily mistake that as being confident, when in fact the root of ego and pride is insecurity and a lack of confidence. It's fake. It is to confidence what stevia is to sugar. There's a good one. Clip that.
That's a very interesting point. I'm the way I define confidence is also very similar to that. It's that having that stack of evidence of past competence, right? So the driving one's a good example, right? Because have you heard of the 4 stages of competence? So you have unconscious incompetence. So you are unaware that...
I have heard, yeah.
And then it scales up to eventually unconscious competence. Driving's the perfect example. You get in, you're on autopilot. There's so many times where I've driven home from work, hour-long drive. Suddenly I'm home, like, I can't remember any of that drive because I wasn't thinking. Yeah. I was just in flow. That's confidence, right? Your confidence in your skill to do the thing. Yeah. And it's very true. The confidence being confused with or misinterpreted for ego. That's interesting. Something I had in my notes is that one thing when you might be having a discussion with or someone's describing a confident person, they're really just describing someone who's heavily extroverted. Yeah. You know, so it's like, and this is where I think an issue comes up with people who are more introverted people, are fed this narrative that they're just naturally less confident. It's not the case. You can have very confident introverts,
You're just drained and energized by different things, but yes, it's misunderstood.
Exactly. So looking at it from and this is a really interesting, just the shift in the definition of looking at it as a competence-based thing, because now it's actionable. It's something you can work on. So
yeah, that was a game changer for me. Hormozy has a one-liner on that was quite influential for me. It's like, confidence comes from competence.
Yeah.
And competence is just doing the thing over and over till you get good enough at it. That helped keeping it very practical and very actionable.
Yep.
But yeah, so confidence is a big thing a lot of guys sort of face. And so, yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll just start to share sort of my battle with this. So me growing up, some of my earliest memories, I just remember how chronically, like being really little, but how chronically frustrated I felt in general. Because it so often felt like I couldn't properly express what I was thinking or feeling in a way where people actually grasped what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
I couldn't express myself in a way that others understood, which was very frustrating. It took me to the age of 30 to get diagnosed with Asperger's and ADHD. And so looking back, it's like, this makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And so as a young guy, a young child, toddler even, with those conditions, the way you perceive the world seemingly just seems to be very different. The way that my mind thinks about things can be very black and white, straightforward language.
Yep.
And when you're little and your vocabulary isn't that broad, like the way that I express my thoughts and opinions and likes and dislikes and frustrations and things, it comes across apparently very harshly. And so I have really battled with confidence all my life because I have chronically been at odds with people all my life.
Yeah.
Sometimes intentionally, sometimes my fault, like it can be inflammatory and like that's fine. I'm not going to blame all of my social issues on just being autistic. But that was a very real factor when it feels like you are looking at the world differently and speaking an ever so slightly different language, especially the social cues and things. So I clashed with parents, brother, friends, teachers, family, everyone the whole way along. So often not knowing that I was.
Yep.
A lot of my clashes and relational breakdowns extending to all those categories. The breakdowns for me often came like very, very blindsided. Like I just didn't see it coming till the person finally snapped and it was like, I've given up on you, I've had enough. And so my experience growing up from people was I'm trying to interact and I'm trying to express myself. And it doesn't feel like anyone's getting it. And I'm really, really, really trying. And I just keep getting my ass kicked. And so that leads to a kid who I didn't really take very many risks or try new things because I just had doubt in my own ability. It was hard for me to socialize because I was just, and I still battle this now. I'm in the process right now of trying to actively, I assume people think the worst of me. Right? I assume if a client expresses any kind of like, the slight frustration that they're not losing weight as fast as they want, and I can diagnose why they're not doing what they sort of should be doing.
Yeah.
But I assume, oh no, they're gonna leave and they're not getting a good result, and I've fucked it up, and I try and like this still plagues me. One client that I love the other day was in the gym and he's got rheumatoid arthritis, and he was saying this one particular thing. He thinks, if I push the weight too hard on this, it's going to damage my feet. And I was sort of just in my own little space thinking through what my understanding of his condition, pain science. I'm like, I don't think it should be damaging your feet in the way that you think it will. He's like, this is what my specialist said. I'm thinking out loud. I'm like, I would want to talk to your specialist because it's based on my understanding of X. That doesn't make sense that that's what would be happening. And he got like genuinely upset. Like I was being dismissive. And I'm like, no, I'm like trying to think this thing through because I'm trying to walk this line of, I want to get you a great result. And if we're scared of doing certain movements or certain things because we think it's going to damage our feet, well, if that's untrue and it's not going to make your feet worse, then we're holding you back from making progress that would otherwise greatly benefit your life. So I'm coming at it from this whole other, and he's just hearing this PT who's not a specialist, who isn't trained, is dismissing what I'm saying about a condition that I have to battle with every day. I'm like, no, that's not, fuck, I'm here again. I'm active. Like, the whole frustration is I'm here trying to get you the best result I can, and it's making you upset. And like, that has been my life.
Yeah.
Oh, that has been my life. So I think that's part of why I argue and debate the way that I do. Because when you're growing up constantly being told what you've done wrong and you've pissed people off and a defense mechanism emerges of like, okay, well, I'm going to analyze the accusations that you're making against me, because if I'm always feeling guilt all the time sucks. And so part of my thinking was, subconsciously, I didn't think about it in these terms when I was a kid, but it was like, if I can eliminate, like, am I guilty of all these things people are saying? If the answer is no, then I, in theory, alleviate a significant part of my guilt. And I won't feel as bad. Turns out, with most people, this is like a human nature thing I've learned from psychology. I'm kind of glad I'm not mostly by default like this. But most people, if they're upset, don't want to be corrected.
Yeah, when someone's in an emotional state, you're not getting a...
So once again, I'm in a position as a kid trying to wrap my head around how I see things differently. And I'm like, part of my solution will be, I will tell the person who's leveling these accusations at me that I think accusation A, B, and D out of A, B, C, D are wrong and not fair. And that way I'm resolving the issue, because it's like, oh, it was a misinterpretation and I don't have to feel bad. And no, that makes it worse.
Yeah. Yep.
So my confidence around people growing up has been horrific, because I have been terrified constantly that I'm going to wake up one day, say something, and someone's going to be like, that's it, I'm out of your life now. Because that has been my experience. Yeah. And I've had three incredibly, I won't go into it today because I'll probably start breaking down, in all honesty, but I have had three of the closest people in my life pretty much say that to my face. And I got stuff to work on, so I've worked on it. But yeah, I've got a little bit more I can sort of go into, but that's a very quick sort of overview of that has been my experience growing up with people. And so I have lacked a tremendous amount of confidence, a tremendous amount of insecurity. So when people say I'm battling a lack of confidence, I don't know how to improve, I just feel so shitty about myself, please understand, I hope I'm fully truthful when I say this, I think I understand the depths of what that feels like more than most.
Yeah, I think, as I said before, it's one of those universal truths that I think I can't think of anyone that I know that wouldn't have an area that they haven't felt that in, you know? I think it's a universal truth, man. And I guess from that, this has kind of gone a different direction to what I thought. But someone who's in that position, then, what do you think? It's very easy to feel like there's no obvious solution to that. Where do you start?
I think what I'll do first, because I do have an answer for that, but I think what I'll do first is I'll run through how the lack of confidence in my life manifested itself and the impact that had.
Yep.
And then how I got out of it, or how I am getting out of it. So the first thing would be I avoided not all challenges. I took stuff on. I developed a bit of an attitude of I don't care what people think of me to a degree. I cared more, the people that I chose to care about when they had an issue with me, that set off the anxiety, but I developed a hardness to everyone else from like, I don't care what you think of me. Which is probably why when I was a teenager, I got accused of, I've never been drunk in my life, which people find hard to believe, but I've never been drunk. But people accused me of being drunk at parties because I had such little inhibitions because I didn't care what people thought. That was also part of me coping with deep down really caring about what people think. But the way that manifested itself was like, I got married very young and I loved my ex-wife. I truly did. In many ways, she's a phenomenal woman. But I know now part of my committing as young as I did was, okay, I have this beautiful woman who tolerates me. That's rare. I meet someone who tolerates me, who's willing to stick with me. I don't want to risk losing this, so I'm just going to commit all in. Even though I think the things that caused us to split were apparent before we even got married. They were like, these were factors beforehand that were I bit maybe more secure in myself, or would have been like, maybe this isn't the best idea. But so it led me to, because that soothed part of my insecurity. Okay, you've ticked this box in life, you've got this person. But part of the breakdown of the marriage, honestly, was I lent too heavily on her for emotional support, and that's not a healthy place for a man to be. You do not want to be a man, like you can lean on your spouse, of course. I think everything's on a spectrum, but I think with how severe my mental health got, I got to a point where like a significant part of my strength was like, I became like a leech on her support. And I can say that honestly, and I can see what effect that clearly did have on her.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard when the person you love leaves and says, you're not the man I needed you to be, and you know how quickly they moved on to other people. Like, that's the most emasculating thing you can possibly go through. And the root of that was, one of the core roots of that was a lack of confidence. That's part of the point I'm making there.
I have just, sorry to jump in.
No, jump in.
The emotion thing, this is something that I've had so many conversations with people about. Because I feel like there's sort of two extremes in culture right now, right? So there's the red pill, completely detached from emotions, whatever. I'm not going to go into that.
No, I don't like that, yeah.
But I do think that there's sort of the mainstream push feels like, toxic masculinity and all this kind of thing. The counter to that is always to push men too far into their emotions. What I believe is that it's not healthy for us to sit down and always, being very general here, right? The default solution is always to sit down and talk about the way you feel and really ruminate on the thoughts. For me, what I believe is that the best method of dealing with that most of the time, because most problems are not as big as what they initially feel like, right? Action is the best solution to that.
Yeah.
And a byproduct of that is action, accomplishment, helps build confidence. This will probably come up later, but just there where you were mentioning, the over-reliance or sort of offloading emotion too much to someone else, easy to spiral into, very easy. Not a good solution, I don't think.
I think the distinction I would make, I think it's objectively a good thing for men to have spaces where you can fully express your thoughts and feelings on something that is crushing you.
Yep.
Without fear of judgment or people clapping back immediately and being like, you need to man up. Like, even if they do, and I know people like this, and I've been in that stage, a lot of people do, like, the water isn't as deep as you think, sort of way. So sometimes it is. Sometimes it's fucking deep. Okay? I've been through that. Sometimes it really is awful. Sorry. But regardless, men need a space to just be like, this is what I'm thinking and feeling. All of it. I know I probably do need to toughen up, and I know I need to be better. I know, but I also want to let it out. I think the line for me becomes when that expression becomes the addiction, where it's like, then you get the sympathy from people, and it's like, and the pity, and it's like the relief, the validation, and you keep coming back for that. I think you need a space as a man to offload and then be like, cool, now you've decompressed. What are you going to do?
Yeah, because
when that's missing, problem.
Yeah, because I think it's very hard to look at things objectively if you're purely in a emotional state, because you're in such
You
a
can't. It's animal mode.
yeah. So you need to be able to. This is why for me, it's the easiest sort of method for me to, whether I'm really pissed off about something, upset about something, whatever. The first thing is to just move. So like for me, it's a walk isn't quite enough. I'm a little bit more high energy than that, so I need to go lift weights or go punch a punching bag or something. Always a punching bag. But then I have that time where it's like, okay, the emotional response, I've dealt with that. Now I can look at this situation objectively. It still might be a very intense thing and it's a very real problem, but now I can look at it from a more objective point of view, and decision making is easier, because decision making based on emotion, very rarely a good thing.
To a degree, appreciate that you may be more fortunate in some respects in how you're able to do that than others. I spent years, because I can be highly rational, but also with my conditions, my emotional volatility historically much better now. I've worked incredibly hard, but my emotional volatility through the roof. So I can be there still working and still barely sleeping because I'm sitting there with so much anxiety of like, what you're doing isn't going to work. It's all about to fall apart. Like, it took me a long time to learn how to work with my head, how to get past the emotion. So my point is, some people are naturally going to experience their anxiety or their emotions much more intensely than others.
Course.
And that's a massive... So having lived that, I understand and appreciate it. Spoilers for later on, very quickly, you still have to play the cards you're dealt. You still have to take action. Like even someone like me, this is why I'm passionate about this subject. You have to. But yeah, coming back to sort of my long-winded way of answering your question through storytelling, it also impacted my behavior in the career choices that I made. So when I started doing personal training, I didn't work at a commercial gym. I just started working from a garage at home, largely because at the time I had 2 little kids and I had sort of just come back into fitness, back into PT. And in all honesty, initially when I started, it was just like, I want to make a few extra bucks on the side. I quickly realized I do not look like or feel like a personal trainer. And I wasn't an amazing trainer at that stage. And I didn't want to be exposed by being in a public gym. In hindsight, I should have just gone to an Anytime Fitness or something, because most of the startup PTs there have just finished their qualification and they're not very good either, which is fine. I should have just... But I was so... I cared so much about what other people thought of me, and just I didn't want to be exposed to another environment where I'd have people telling me, you suck, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Like that's the truth. So I started coaching privately, which has been great in some respects, because the people that I learnt from were some of the best I found in the industry. I consumed all their books, all their courses, so now if I put myself in the hierarchy of coaches out there, especially in my niche, in my the people I want to work with, I'd say I'm one of the best at what I do. But that's not a good way to start out in your career. It's not a good way to start out trying to grow a business. As getting people in the door early on was very, very difficult, and that creates a lot of financial pressures, which bled over into more anxiety, less sleep, more marriage difficulty. It was just awful. So the lack of confidence for me developed avoidant behavior. It developed a dependency on... I had a small circle of friends. I didn't want any more friends, so I lent really heavily on the connections I did have. That box was ticked. And the idea of losing them was like, you become almost possessive of the people you care about, because it's like, how do I function without you? I've been that guy. I definitely not anymore, but I have been that guy. And it's like what you hold, it's like a bar of soap. You hold onto it too tight, it just pops out of your hand. And so when friendships started to break down, you're just floating on your own. Like, this has been my lived experience. I'm not going on too long, am I?
No.
Okay, so part of my animal brain, I guess, part of my reflexive way of coping with my lack of confidence was I developed an ego on some things. I know I can sort of think through things. I know now I'm not an especially intelligent person, but I do think I have a bit of an innate intellect on some areas. And so there I built an ego around that, because ego soothes that And pride soothes that I don't feel confident. You feel like a small man. Ego and pride artificially blows you up. It's like injecting synthol into your biceps. Your biceps look bigger, but they're not stronger. Everything comes back to the gym. And so, my ex described me once as she's like, you're like Jekyll and Hyde. And she was 100% on the money. Again, I can attribute part of that to the ASD, but it's my job to work on it. But your ego, when you build things around ego, when your ego is threatened or challenged, it's so fragile. Either it crumbles and your anxiety, your realization of your lack of confidence is more intense.
Yep.
It's like lancing a boil, like it's excruciating. Or you arc up defensively and now you're incredibly hostile to someone. So that was part of my coping. I used screens. Gaming was a big one. Hours and hours and hours of not doing work, just numbing the anxiety, numbing the lack of confidence.
It comes back to that path of inaction, right? Because you do the thing that the stakes are much lower. Yeah. There's less risk of objective failure, right? So it's... Yeah.
And games for me, like I really got into Halo when I was growing up. I played a lot of video games when I was young, and I could pick up most games very quickly and get good at them quite quickly. Halo was one of those games where finally now I'm beating other people online. I loved multiplayer. And the vast majority of the time, I would dominate matches. This is not an ego thing. This is like statistics at this point. Most games, I just crush most people at because I played it obsessively. And that was one of the few avenues of real sort of confidence I had, which is why it was addictive, because it was like all these other realms, especially as a teenager, I was like, I'm not good with girls, I'm not good socially, my academic stuff is like because I can't focus. I didn't know I had ADHD, but I'm like, I struggle with focus. I suck at everything but this one thing. I'm pretty good at this one thing. And so I highlight that for people who might be like, oh, like that might be a light bulb moment for someone listening. They're like, this is why I put so much stock in this one thing that I do, because actually the rest of me feels very fragile. And you need to be real with yourself with that, because that's ego. That's just masking. You need to address the other areas.
Where did the reframe come for you then?
Okay. So I had a lot of moments along the way. Like it wasn't like all through up until I got diagnosed, I never took any action. Like I understood along the way, I would lean into some things. I just had this cycle where it was almost like a 1 step forward, 2 step back, 3 steps forward, 2 step back. Like it was a yo-yo. I suppose the major tip, like I got diagnosed and then a month later my ex left. And then I had another pretty significant relationship in my life break down at almost the exact same time. And so I went through a period of being on my own with 2 kids and a business. That was my lonely chapter. Like I'm still in it, but that was like a real intense, lonely chapter. And they say like they say necessity is the mother of invention, right? I got to a point where I was in a mental hospital for 2 weeks. I found out some things around my divorce that just broke me psychologically. And so I went into this mental hospital for 2 weeks because I was ready to walk in front of a train. Like I was on the phone to Lifeline, parked in a car, looking for a section of railroad track where the trains weren't slowing down between stations. So I wanted that thing to hit me at full speed so I'd be done. But I managed to get myself in hospital and went to the mental hospital. And like this is a conversation I've had with myself many times, but sort of had to draw a line in the sand. I could go on about like this internal conversation, but I'll try and keep it real short. It's just essentially like you got to draw a line in the sand. Are we gonna quit or are we gonna keep going? And I made myself I don't know if this is sensitive for YouTube, but I think suicide is something that we actually need to sort of talk about openly and sort of tease it through. This will sound like a really, really morbid solution to my dark headspace, but for me, it actually really helped, because I knew I was setting myself a trap, like a good one, in that I said to myself, okay, you are at rock bottom. As far as my life goes, this was my rock bottom. Are you out of ideas on how you could improve your life? I was like, no, there are things I can think of that I could do that would make my business better, help me personally, help my kids. There are things I could do. It's excruciating to do them when I feel the way I feel, because I know the payoff is quite, like, payoff may not actually happen. Nothing's for certain. And it's going to be further down the road. So I have to endure feeling shit while taking action, which is another point we'll get to later with confidence and action taking. But I was like, no, there's things I can do. So the deal I made with myself was, okay, you have to keep trying until you run out of ideas. And when you run out of ideas, then you can off yourself. That's your get out of jail free card. And that was oddly relieving, of like, okay, if I actually run out of ideas and I don't know how to make my life any better, and it sucks like it sucks now, I can make the pain go away. Knowing that I was never going to run out of ideas. Because there's always something that I could do to positively take a step forward. Even if it was like, you're going to leave the house and go for a walk today. It's like, crap, I can't off myself today because I've got that walk booked. Like, so I set myself the trap. So, okay, so the reframing happened through that really aggressive period of like, all right, if we're not giving up on these ideas, like, you've just been diagnosed, you've gone through all this, your kids need you, you need you, we got to figure this shit out. So I learnt, let's see if there's something in my notes, but like, I learnt how to take action. I started reading some really helpful books. So I went to England almost a year ago. Amazing, life-changing trip. That was a year after all of this stuff the mental hospital I've just sort of talked about happened. But I went to England to sort of celebrate all the work that I did that year to grow my business, and despite all the pain I was in. And on the way over there and back, I was reading a book called The Courage to be Disliked, which exposed me to something called Adlerian psychology, or individual psychology, which I quite liked. And there's a core concept, I'm a complete beginner with this stuff, but there's a core concept in Adlerian psychology of inferiority and superiority, feelings of inferiority and superiority.
Yep.
And just as like a measure of, like, you're a social creature, a lot of your pain is going to stem from you feel inferior to other people. And that may actually be valid in a lot of cases. But instead of that beating you down and becoming something that only perpetuates a downward spiral, make you more inferior, you have to condition yourself to recognize, okay, these feelings of inferiority I actually don't need to worry about, because that's my mind playing on things that aren't worth focusing on. So I can eliminate some of those and take away some, I get relief, good. These other areas of inferiority I need to address. Big sigh, big breath. Okay. Feels shitty that I know that I'm at this level when I want to be at this level, but I got to play the cards I'm dealt. That helped. Learning to observe my anxiety and being like, okay, this is how it is today. We're still going to do the work that we need to do. We're still going to push. You don't feel like you're good at your job. You don't feel like you're a good dad. You don't feel. You are going to take the actions anyway.
Yeah, that almost, taking that step back lets you see what the path is, right? Taking a step back from that emotional, just not knowing what the fuck's going on. Step back, look at it.
Yeah. So if you're happy for me to continue talking.
Well, one point I wanted to make on the what you went into with, like, you're making this commitment. If I can't think of any way that I can improve my situation, right? This is a point that I had in about people might be setting the bar too high at times. And when I say this, I'm not saying that, when I say you need to lower the bar, I'm not saying you have to set the bar low, right? I'm just saying you're probably overshooting. So I know people in my own life that have, gone through this a lot, where they get really frustrated at their lack of progress. I've done it myself, right?
Me too. Yeah.
Where you have this ideal that's just so far out of reach. It's to be that you're a different species at that point, right? You have to step things back, and Peterson talks about this all the time. It's the whole concept of clean your room, right? Start small, but it's progress, and being able to go, okay, I'm setting the bar to this level where, yeah, it's so far away from what I want to be, but also it's enough of a step to where it's still a challenge. It's still something that I need to put real effort into doing. But if I pushed myself that 110%, I could probably do it, you know? So I really think that that's a reframe that people need to have, of not setting the bar so high that you're not going to make these drastic changes like this. It's not going to happen. You need to pull things back a little bit and look at things more realistically. I think that's a very important thing.
Yes. Yeah. So reframing is useful. I want to be careful to not do too much of like the mental masturbation, going too deep and complex sort of into things. That's why I shared like I want people to understand sort of my story, and that like I get the lack of confidence, and I have experienced what you're talking about there of like, if you become too outcomes focused, you don't appreciate the journey. You don't look up.
Yeah.
And having been someone who, like, I empathize so much with that point that you've made. Like, this is how crazy the mind is. Like, I've gone through extended periods. I remember like walking to school to pick my girls up from school, and I didn't even want to look at them in the face because I felt like such a failure of a father. The problem with that is my girls are now 8 and 6. You look back and go, because I was so ashamed and because I felt so awful, I actually missed chunks of their life that I will never get back, because they will never be 3, 2, 4 again. They'll never be that age again. I don't get to do that phase better again. And so this is why, you know, guys need a space where they can just dump and get it out. But then also like, you need to know what to do. So much of my anxiety was also like, we keep sort of circling the core point we want to make today, which is take action. But a big problem with that can be, I don't know what action to take, which causes a lot of anxiety. Yeah. So how did I gain confidence in myself? Okay. All right. Now we can get to the fun stuff. All right. First of all, you don't know what you don't know. So we've done the positioning podcast. People who haven't watched that one, go back and watch the episode on positioning, because that played a crucial role for me. Positioning yourself mentally, positioning yourself around people and the circles you sort of swim in. Go and watch that episode, because that was a huge impact on me. You start reading books, listening to podcasts, listening to, exposing yourself to people who talk about the things you're struggling with. Just expose yourself to different forms of thinking. That helped me reframe, like get out of my own very, very narrow lived experience and go, okay, other people have experienced what I am experiencing. Other people have made it out of this. Other people have had it worse, or other people have had it different. Okay, I'm getting all this information. Some of it is sinking in. The Hormozy confidence comes from competence. Competence comes from repetition. 3 simple steps. It's like, cool. If I want to be confident in a certain thing, I need to do more of the thing. Take the emotion out of it, or work at keeping the emotion out of it, and just focus on wrestling with the task till I get good at it. Over time, I was able to sort of ask myself the question, what kind of man do you want to be? What kind of life do you want to lead? I would say this is crucial. Like I do this when I go through onboarding new clients, when we sort of tease out their goals. But for any of the guys listening, like, where do I start? It's like, I ask men this question, what kind of life do you want to lead? So that could look like, where do you want to live? What kind of relation, like marriage, do you want to have? Kids? And what do you want your life to be? A lot of people don't even think of that. They honestly don't. And the other one they don't think about is, what kind of man do you want to be?
Yeah, I I don't want to
No,
cut you off, but
please, I'm talking a lot. You interrupt.
We've spoke about the importance of goal setting, right? Getting very good, and it's not just goal setting. I think maybe we need to do a whole dedicated topic on what goal setting actually is or what it should be, because I think goal setting can be very misinterpreted with people, right? But getting it right, and that's a huge thing. Knowing exactly what it is that you're looking for at a very granular level, I think, is a good starting point, because now you have these predetermined things that you can work towards. I'm huge on that now of having, how can I track that I'm on progress for things? And then further to that point of being someone that you're proud of, there was a podcast that I listened to where, I can't remember the guy's name. He's this like cowboy guy in America. He just smokes cigars.
I found his channel right before he blew up.
So interesting. He's always smoking a cigar and he's just so cool. But anyway, I
forget the name of the channel, but he's lovely to listen to. Yeah.
Well, he was on Modern Wisdom, and I'd watched his content way before because I just think he's just the coolest fucking dude. He's just chilling, smoking a cigar all the time on his ranch, just sick. Right?
He would say everything we've said in half the time too.
100%. But he had this thing where he was asked, what does it mean to be a man that you're proud of? And he was like, look, or how do you know that you're someone that you could be proud of or whatever? And he's just like, I always aimed to be the person that if I saw him in the bar, I'd buy him a beer. I'd just hang out with him. And I was like, that's a really fucking cool way to look at it, right? It's just like, that's a dude that I would just be happy to just have a chat with. And that's a really good way to, I think, measure, are the actions you're taking conducive to that? Is what I'm doing in the moment the behavior of, you're almost looking at that ideal as a separate person?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think this is, Peterson might have even spoke about this, right? You have this ideal of, it's someone that you're currently not. So act in the way that's it sounds so cliche to say, but act in a way that person would be proud or respectful of.
Yeah. So, and this is why it's important to go through those questions of what do you want your life to look like and what kind of person do you want to be?
Yeah.
And then, so I went through that exercise. I came up with my answers. I'll spare everyone the detail of my fleshed out answers for those. But I really sat down and I chewed on these questions for weeks, months. I've chewed on them before all this stuff happened, but this was like a new, refreshing approach to all these things. And so then it's a layering of sort of looking at that and going, okay, I didn't look at it through the lens of context. I didn't look at it through the lens of confidence at the time. But at its core, that's what I was doing. It was like, okay, the man I want to become, what makes him that man? And it's going to come down to what he does.
Yep.
More or less. So, well read, fit, capable of self-defense when needed, successful business that deeply impacts the lives of men, makes other people's lives better, devoted, fantastic father. Now that I'm single, it's like being sexually extremely selective, right? So I have no interest in, I have the freedom to, I have no interest in hooking up. I'm setting an example for my girls for the kind of man that I want them to marry when they're older. I'm setting an example for my boys that I coach. When I think about the men that I admire and I respect, they have these qualities that I want to foster in all these. So I'm layering all these things, and then that helps me understand the behaviors I need to do. It's like, all right, to be a dad, like reading parenting books, spending having good conversations with my girls, listening to them, with my boys, with business, and what I'm going to do in my spare time, how I approach my views on women and dating and who I want in my life, in my girl's life, and I could map these things out. And that led me back to the deal I made with myself. Like, once you're out of ideas, it was like, now I can see it's a lot, but I can see there's a lot of stuff that I can do that I'm now driven to do because I've sort of broken down this sequence and I've clarified my thoughts. And as I practice and I screwed up and I tried again and I tried again and I pushed and I can look back and be like 25-year-old me would be so proud of who this guy is.
Yeah. There's a, this is why I think what we're doing with this is important, because it's showing it's real shit, right?
Yeah. I'm not there yet. I'm in the process, and I want to. That's why I spent so long telling my story today. Or part of it is because I want the listeners to know he gets it, and he's making progress. Like, you can do this, guys. You can.
And to a degree, you're still in it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Shit. Yeah.
There's a resource that I use that really helped me with this, because I think building out as much detail as you can on what that ideal thing is, very powerful, right? So Peterson has this future authoring program that he has, and I did that a few years ago. And the reason I think that that's so powerful, and it relates to what you were just talking about, right? Where now your options are so expanded, because if you have all of these facets of what this ideal is, there's all of these different pathways, right? To get closer to each of these goals. Because it's not like you're pointing to one thing. It's that ideal there's so many elements to it, right? Yeah. And so if it's fitness, if it's professional, whatever, personal relationships, all of these things, if you've got all of these different elements that you're working on, there's always something. There's one decision you could be making that day that's making progress on something. And I wonder if the kind of core point to everything we've said today is it a more reasonable, is it just as simple as not looking at confidence as anything else but competence?
I think there is a distinction. I don't know if I can sort of elucidate what the distinction is in my head, but they're like so interconnected, right? To be confident, you need to have competence. It comes first. So yeah, I think there is a distinction, but yeah, it's a and so part of this point that I want to make with my story is I wasn't confident before I took action. I had to have some degree of faith. It is like, you don't have a big chest till you do a lot of the work to get a big chest. Yep. The same things you do when you have a big chest to get a bigger chest are the same things you do when you don't have one to get one. And that takes a certain degree of courage, which is why the book, The Courage to Be Disliked and The Courage to Be Happy, was such an interesting, like, this concept of courage. Now, courage, I think, is very linked to confidence, because I think courage is a prerequisite to gain competence.
100%.
In many instances, right? Yep. So if you're a guy who's got this thing of like, I can't approach girls because I'm not confident enough, it's like, you don't need confidence, you want courage. I'm not courageous. Here's courage. Courage is you're scared shitless and you do it anyway.
Yes.
That's all it is.
Yep.
You can't be, pardon me, you can't be fearless and be courageous.
No.
Right?
And the context for different people is going to be different in that situation, right? So like, that's a perfect example of, the way I sort of thought about this. I was talking to a friend about this a long time ago, and I said, you have someone like Conor McGregor or something step into the octagon in the UFC. Now, there might be nerves because he's competing and whatever, but I don't look at that as bravery per se. Now, don't get me wrong. Any professional fighter is a warrior. I respect them completely.
There's a level of that and then a level beyond.
Yes. Whereas if I step in the ring with McGregor, I wouldn't. But doing it in spite of the fear, that's the courageous act. And that's the thing that I think people need to really focus on. And it's, you don't not do the thing because you're not brave or you're not confident to do it. That's the path to doing it. And that's probably a good sign that it is a directionally correct action.
Yeah.
Right?
Though I will say, in that case, I think the reason why the Khabib and McGregor fight was so entertaining is because Khabib is someone who's clearly highly competent by just like that was real confidence. He's sitting on the press conference thing they do, and McGregor's talking his usual mindset, mind attack shit, and he's just like, "I'm gonna smash you, boy." Just that is a degree of I did not see until he flipped a switch and jumped the octagon at the end. But before that, I didn't see. There was definitely ego in there, but I didn't see that. Primarily, I just saw real, genuine confidence. Whereas part of the satisfying thing of watching McGregor go down, and that was like, finally his ego's been shattered. And so what I another point I wanted to make is what I've experienced with this slow uptick in confidence is peace. I don't feel puffed up like I'm the man. It's like there's a lovely humility, and I've still got my ego and my pride and my arrogance. I'm just, it's a work in progress. But at the moment, I just feel so much more peaceful. I don't feel like I'm the best dad ever. I'm just way better than who and what I was. And I have a confidence because I can look back. Like, again, Hormozy says this. It's like a big part of the confidence thing is you can look back and see the evidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I a pretty decent father? I look at when I'm alone, what are my thoughts around my children? And like I meditate on how I can be better and how I can help guide them more. And like they're good things for a dad to do when I spend time with them. And I get things wrong, but I openly apologize to my girls regularly. And I can look at all these actions I've taken. I'm like, yeah, I should have a degree of peace with my ability as a father because of what I've done and what I am continuing to do. Real confidence is like a picnic by a lake. I think like, there's times where the rubber hits the road and it's a more aggressive confidence, but really for me at least, going from that pit of anxiety that I can go up and talk to strangers now. I don't worry so much about people. A lot of those things I grew up with, I've worked incredibly hard to unpack and do better at, and it's just peaceful. It's
that warrior in the garden analogy, right?
I honestly love that. It struck me the first time I heard it. There's such I picture like a Japanese guy.
I think it is a Japanese proverb.
I think the picture that came up in the show probably is, but like the movie The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. People have got their issues with it, fine, but there's something about that movie that's so beautiful for me. I love when he's in the village and he finally has that sense of peace, and there's like a bit of a montage of him enjoy, and I'm like, there is something, again, goosebumps. There's something just so peaceful about, like, if you look at the man at the start, if you look at Tom Cruise at the start of that movie, he's confident in his abilities, but there's a very clear insecurity. He's so wounded in himself, and by the end, there's this peaceful confidence, this assurity. There's another great movie, I don't know if you've seen it, Jet Li, Fearless. I think maybe it's called Fearless. So Fearless is this movie, similar sort of thing. Jet Li is like a master martial artist, and he gets challenged by other masters. It's very much one of those movies. And he's good. He should have confidence in his abilities. He is the best, but he's also got the ego. And he goes around, he beats, kicks the crap out of all the masters. He accidentally kills one of them. And I haven't seen the movie in many, many years, so I hope I'm not butchering it. But I think he either gets outcast or he like runs away, and he goes through this whole journey of very similar to Last Samurai. He goes to a village, meets a woman, discovers rice farming and an element of peace in letting go of the ego, and then he just has this peaceful confidence about himself, where the fights he has at the end are sort of to defend China against Japan or something like that. But there's this quality to him where the ego is dead and he's still got the skill. I'm covered in goosebumps. Like, that's what I want for myself. Yeah. I'm not there yet. I'm 100% not there yet. I'm still an egotistical shit sometimes, but I hope today I've done a good job of sort of sharing this journey that I've sort of gone through. And I'm not there yet, but this experience I've had of, as I start doing the work and I focus on the inputs and I keep the goal in mind as like the proxy of, am I moving in the right direction? I keep that in view. I'm experiencing more and more peace and more real confidence.
Yeah.
And that's what I wish for every guy listening, every guy that I get the chance to speak to, work with, whatever, is to experience something like that while every day becoming a better, more formidable man.
That's a perfect way to fucking end it, man. That, dude, this didn't go in the direction that I initially thought it would.
Really?
No, but it was better. There was some really good shit in this.
I apologize to everyone listening if I did most of the talking on this one.
I think there's a lot in that because it's clearly, when I initially sort of mapped this out, it was very much more of an intellectual thing, but this is something that was clearly very hit close to home for you. And so that, dude, you shared some really great shit in that. Thank you for that.
I hope it helps.